I've been working towards using and testing every single Nikon branded Z mount lens, and I've hit a new milestone. That's why in this video we are ranking every single medium telephoto, as defined by Google's definition of 70 to 135 millimeters, by their value for money. I'll be getting these scores from the value for money category at zwadephotosales.com/theopticexplorer, where you can see my overall score of every single Z mount lens that I've used. Scores are subject to change over time, so check back regularly. And to clarify, I consider value for money as price as it relates to a combination of optics, versatility, and build quality. If I give a lens a 3, that means it's high value. A 2 means it's worth the price that you pay, and a 1 is labeled as a bad value, which could mean it is overpriced for what you get, or maybe it's just not versatile enough for what they're charging. Value for money is kind of nuanced and it can be subjective, so take these informed opinions with a grain of salt. After we get all of our medium telephoto lenses on the table, we will then arrange the tiebreakers for a full best to worst value for money. If you're shopping and I've helped you out with this video today, I hope you'll consider the link in the description. I get a 2% commission if you do so. Finally, the prices in this video are pre-price increase, which is rumored to occur in June of 2025. But the increases should be fairly uniform and shouldn't change my placement or score. So, if you're ready, let's go. All right, so we have our 17 lenses that made it into the range for this video. And our first one up is the DX16-50 f3.5 to 6.3 VR. This got a 2. 309.95. This lens just barely makes the list on its top end when factoring in crop factor, making it a 75 millimeter. It's a cheap build, cheap price, pretty normal or weak optically. It's a kit lens with an okay focal range and its variable aperture. As long as you get it as a kit lens at a discount, it maintains a 2 in value. Buying it on its own, it might be a 1 to you, but I'd probably keep it at 2 myself. The DX18-140 f3.5 to 6.3 VR. This is a 2. $639.95. This is a very fun lens to use. It covers the whole focal range we are talking about today. Optically, it's weak in some areas and middle of the road in others, and it feels kind of cheap as well. What makes this lens worth it, in my opinion, is the versatility of the focal range, and its functionality is actually pretty dang good. It's pretty quick. The 24-70 f4S. It's a 3. High value. $999.95. This lens on its top end is bare minimum to qualify for this video, which is great because it's straight up a good value. F4 is fine because it's not variable. And optically, this lens is really good. It's also really versatile because, I mean, it's a mid-range zoom. They just are versatile. At full price, it's worth the money. And it's even better if you get it as a kit lens, even though it's way better than a kit lens should be. Hey, we got our first 3 of the video. The 24-120 f4S. I gave this a 2 or 3. It's $1,099.95. This lens almost covers the whole medium telephoto range. Optically, the scoring is kind of all over, but what's important is how the overall image comes together. Really nice. It's really versatile too, and fun to walk around with. It feels pretty good in the hands, but I hate external zooms. I gave this lens a 2 or 3 in value. It's worth every penny, unless you get it at a discount as a quote-unquote kit lens. Then it's just a smoking good deal. The 24-200 f4 to 6.3 VR. $899.95. The only top score this got in my scoring system is versatility. But this lens is not good anywhere else. The fact that it's $900 offends me. It's a $499.95 lens. That's it. I'll die on that hill. It gets a 1 in value for money with no what ifs, however, or unless. If it was a Python script, it would be if condition, it's a 24-200 f4 to 6.3 VR, then it's a terrible value. And it's true. I don't know programming. I don't know if any of that made sense. And we got our first 1 of the video. The 24-70 f2.8S. It got 2 points. $2,399.95. This is almost a perfect optical score. It's a mid-range zoom, so it's versatile. It also feels well made, though I don't like external zooms. But I do think it's a little bit overpriced at $2,400, but that price is hard to argue because of what you get. That's why I gave it a 2. It's technically worth the money. The 28-75 f2.8, I gave it a 2. It's $1199.95. Honestly, it's pretty average in optics, but it is a mid-range zoom, constant wide aperture, and since it's better than half the price of the 24-70 f2.8s, I'd love to give it a high value tag, but the f2.8 aperture doesn't save it from just how good the rendering is of the 24-70 f4s, which, by the way, is cheaper brand new, even when it's not in a kit. I think 2 points is fair. The 28-400 f4 to f8 VR, I gave it a 2. It's $1299.95. I did not enjoy testing this lens. The aperture is really painful. The optics are just okay, but you cannot deny the versatility of this lens. It covers the whole range of this video and more. The only thing it shines in, obviously, is versatility. It got a 2 because it does a lot of things, even though it does them in a just okay manner. And optically, it is better than the 24-200. And so if you're gonna pick between one or the other, get this one because it's actually worth the money. The 28-135 f4 PZ got a 2. It's $2599.95. This lens gets a 2 kind of with a caveat. The optics are great, and it's not a variable aperture, while still covering a lot of ground with the fun, useful feature of it being a power zoom. That's why it got a 3 in versatility. I gave it a 2 for worth the money based on photography standards as it relates to its $2,600 price tag. However, a video-focused person could give this a high-value 3, and I wouldn't argue with them in the comments. I'd actually probably agree. The DX50-250 f4.5 to 6.3 VR, it got a 2 or 3. It's $379.95. So with this crop factor, makes it a 75 on the wide end, and then it covers the full range that I'm focusing on in this video. It's actually a pretty good lens optically, and it's pretty darn versatile. It does feel cheap and has a plastic mount, but it has a lot going for it otherwise. That's why I gave it a 2 at full price and a 3 if you get it at a discount as part of a kit. I feel like I might need to hover this because it can go one way or the other. Kinda same goes for this one, same goes for this one. The 70-180 f2.8, I gave it a 2. It's $1249.95, and I gave this lens a 2 because it's pretty decent optically. Build quality is kind of what you'd expect at this price. The lens value is wholly derived from just how much cheaper it is than its big brother coming up next, but optically it's far enough behind said big brother that I can't really call it a super high value. I just think it's exactly worth the money. The 70-200 f2.8 VRS, it got a 2. It's $2699.95. It's really sharp and it's really fast. Otherwise, I find it uninspiring optically. It is, however, a staple for working photographers. It also feels solid and it has internal zooming, so I'd call the build quality really great. Still, I have always thought this lens was overpriced, which is why it's a 2, but it's real close to being called kind of a bad value. I just find that the other members of the S-Line Trinity outclass this lens in optics, and there is a way cheaper option of the 70-180 to contend with. If Nikon releases an S-Line f4 as good as the 14-30 and 24-70 f4S lenses, then this lens is probably going to become a 1. And I know I'm gonna lose some friends behind that one. I just don't think it's $2,600. Like, I think it's $24.99 or even $25.99. Knock $100 off to shut me up, Nikon. Another one that's gonna get me in trouble, the 100-400 f4.5 to 5.6 VRS. I actually gave this lens a 1. It's $2699.95. Optically, it's similar to the 70-200, but I had some quirky functionality with this lens with the autofocusing that always kind of bothered me. I give it a 1 because optically, it kind of deserves a 2, almost 1 because it's overpriced, but the additional quirkiness not focusing closer to infinity and it jittering around while it was focusing, trying to find focus, not really huntering, but just jittering to try to lock in, it makes it slightly worse than the 70-200, which just barely got a 2. This video is about 70-135, so this lens will do those. I just feel like if you're after 400 millimeters, you'd probably just be happier with the 400 f4.5 prime lens. I should add that if this lens came down a couple $100, I would happily give it a 2. The 85mm f1.2s, I gave it a 2. It's $27.99.95. Hear me out. Only 2 lenses have ever achieved a perfect optical score in my list. This lens was the first one to do it. I agree that $2,800 for a medium telephoto prime, regardless of circumstance, can never be a smoking good deal. But this lens being really fast, it's perfect in its optical score, and having the softest, most beautiful fall off you've ever seen, it makes it almost impossible to call it a bad value. It's just worth the money if you've got the money. You can't really knock this lens for almost anything. So as silly as it sounds, making an 85mm prime at $2,800 not overpriced, to be honest, I kind of think it's just worth the money. Sorry. But an 85 prime lens will never be a smoking good deal at $2,800. I don't care how good it is. Boy, we're running out of room in this worth the money here. The 85mm f1.8s. I actually gave it a 1 at $799.95. This lens got a bad value score, just barely, because I don't do decimals and I always round down. Optics on this are actually pretty solid, especially its sharpness. Now, where 85mm don't usually need to be fast, because they're mostly used for portraits where speed doesn't matter, you can't avoid the idea that this lens is just blatantly and obnoxiously for portraits in a world where something like the 50mm f1.8s is a stupid good value, being $200 cheaper than this lens and faster. On its own, I find this lens overpriced only a medium amount, but there are options that will do the same kind of jobs as good or a little better for a lot less money, so it gets a 1. The Nikkor Z105 f2.8 VRS, it got a 3. It's $1,049.95. This lens has gone through some changes in my scoring recently, but it did not affect the fact that this lens just has fantastic optics, and a 105 macro lens is good for a lot of genres outside of macro. It does feel kind of dainty in the hand, but still, you get a superb optic and a lot of usefulness for under $1,100, so I gave it a 3. And finally, the 135 f1.8s Plena got a 2. It's $24.99.95. A lens so intentional in what it is for that kind of cost, $2,500, never really had a chance of being high value. But there are 2 lenses that achieve perfect optical scores in my ranking system, and this is one of them. Functionally, it's fast and accurate too. So while it can never be high value, it's kind of impossible to call it overpriced. It really is just that good. And so what an absolute mess of worth the monies. So now we need to arrange these tiebreakers in a way that makes sense to me. And I want to mention first off that it's clear by this list, by my testing, that for what it's worth, Nikon is consistently giving us stuff that's either high value or worth the money. There's only 3 lenses in this particular range that really I find to be just not quite worth the money that they're charging. But in many cases, if these go on sale, because this just relates to new price, right? If these go on sale, they might be worth it. Except the 24 to 200, because even when it goes on sale, it never hits $500 that I've seen, right? And that's kind of where it needs to be. At least I haven't seen it hit $500. So let's arrange the bad value lenses first. This one, the 24 to 200, I feel like it's just bad, okay? So it's going over here just by itself. Now these 2 I do feel slightly bad about. I feel a little more bad about the 85 1.8s than I do the 100 to 400, because this doesn't have the performance issues that I ran into with the 100 to 400. There's not any quirks to it, right? It's just slightly overpriced. And so we'll put this one at the best of the 1 pointers here, and then we'll put this one in the second worst value. And then we can work out the high value ones here right off the bat. I want to bring this one down, and I want the 24 to 120 to be the highest value for what you pay in the 3 pointers, because this lens is just a little bit better optically, but it, having that extra on the top end here makes this lens way easier to walk around with. You can do a lot more stuff with it. And so to me, it's just more valuable. And this one I think is a pretty solid second place, best value, just because the optics are so good. But no, I changed my mind. I want to put this as the second, the MC105. I want to put it in second place because having that macro feature makes it a little more useful. We'll put this one in a close third place. And these two that are kind of maybe a 2, maybe a 3, just to make some room, I'm going to keep them in the 3s here because there are circumstances where these could be considered 3s. The 28-135 power zoom is optically superior by quite a lot to this one, but this one is pretty useful. I'm going to let this one just be, no, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. I just think this might be a little more useful. We're going to have to make some room here. So let's look at this in usefulness as it relates to price. I think the 18-140, it was kind of close to being a little bit overpriced. And so I kind of want to move this down. Let's take the Trinity here, or part of the Trinity, the 28-75 and the 70-180. I want to put those at the leader of this pack. I think those are super useful and they're so much cheaper than their big brothers that I want to put those there. And continuing with usefulness, I feel like the 18-140 is just like a ton of fun. And so I think that's like a good value too. And honestly, the 16-50 actually could maybe in some instances with some people get a 3. If you get it as a kit, that was, yeah, let's move this down. 16-50, 18-140 is just a ton of fun. I kind of want to leave it there. These are just kind of worth the money, but they're super damn expensive. Let's put the 28-400 up here. The 24-70 is blatantly worth every single penny. The 70-200 was a little kind of riding that line. We're actually going to put this at the bottom of this here. And then the Plena and the 85, they deserve to be worth the money, but they're so expensive that I could see people arguing with that. So let's put this down here. The Plena is a little bit cheaper and it kind of does the same kind of job. So let's stick that right here. The 85-12 right here. And now we can move these back now that we have room. Again, this is more opinionated than other videos, but what we have in first place in the medium telephoto ranked by value, the best bang for your buck, I think, is first place, the 24-120 f4S. In second place, the MC105 f2.8 VRS. In third place, the 24-70 f4S. And then in fourth place, the 28-135 PZ. If you're a photo guy, it deserves to be here. If you're a video guy or girl, maybe this could be higher. But in fifth place, the DX50 to 250 4.5 to 6.3. Now in our worth the money category, we got the 16-50, followed by the 70-180 f2.8, because the 70-200 is obnoxiously more expensive. A little bit tighter of a spread, but still obnoxiously more expensive. The 28-75 f2.8 comes next, followed by the incredibly useful 18-140. Then we've got the 28-400. You can't deny the value for the dollar of what kind of range you're covering, even though I didn't like using it. Next, we have the ones that are just straight up worth the money and its usefulness. It's an absolute staple, the 24-70 f2.8s, followed by the two lenses which do the same kind of job. They're equally as fast as each other, but the Plena is a little bit cheaper. And so following that is the 85mm f1.2s. Primes should just, portrait primes should absolutely never be that expensive, but you can't deny how great it is. Followed by the worst of the worth the money category, the 70-200 f2.8. Now we move into the kind of bad values. The almost not a bad value, but it needs to be a little bit cheaper. And our third to last place is the 85mm f1.8s, followed by the quirky focusing 100 to 400, and in dead last, by a margin, the worst value medium telephoto range lens in the Nikon Z lineup is the 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3. I think I'm pretty happy with the arrangement of every Nikon branded medium telephoto range lens ranked from best to worst value. Let me know in the comments if you agree. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade, and Z Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.